Welcome back to HiCode tutorial. In this video, we'll be talking about data binding. In previous lessons, we've learned using events to make changes to the interface. But HiCode also allows us to make changes automatically without clicking a button or without creating an event. This is achieved through data binding. I will start with a quick introduction to data binding in HiCode and then how to use it. And in the end, I will demonstrate data binding with an example. We'll be making something like a mobile contact list. First, its definition. Data binding is to couple two property values and to synchronize them. And by synchronize, it means when the data source changes as the program runs, it changes the widgets that are bound to it. Let's first quickly go through how to use it before I can show you what exactly bound data look like in the editor. So how to use data binding. First, click Bind symbol on the right of Property panel. And next, click and select in the widget tree to select its couple. And third, edit functions manually. HiCode allows you to write codes by yourself if you'd like to. Without further ado, let's go to the editor. I have already created a new project and this one is for data binding, so the first thing to do is to add a page to the stage. It is a good habit to always hold all your widgets in your page. Let's first quickly go through how to control a widget with an event. First, I will need a text and a button. Set some margin for them, so it will look better. And also I will set this page 1's horizontal alignment to center. What I want to do with them is to change the content of this text by clicking this button. And I'm going to do this with event. So give this button an event. First select a trigger for it. Click. And the target is the text. Set value. Later we'll be making a contact list, so contacts. This is typically how we control a widget with an event. Here we can use inspect to make it into font size. And when I click it, it changes to contacts. Then how to use data binding to control this content. Let's add another text. I've pinned the slides here. Click Bind symbol on the right of Property panel. Let's look at text 2. On the right side of the Property panel, you can find these little buttons look like links or nodes. Click it and it activates data binding for a certain property. When I click this for value, a little cursor icon pops up, and this tells you to select from tree. Now I will try to bind the value of text2 to that of text1. How do I do that? Click and select the widget tree to select its couple. So now I have clicked this and select text1. And don't forget to complete this line, select its value. And then I will change the text of text1. Give it test contacts and apply. Now you will notice that text2 didn't make any changes. This is because data binding doesn't take effect in the editor. But when we go to preview, text2 successfully received the value of text1. So don't worry if your editor doesn't display things as you expected. Okay, so now we've understood the two steps of create and bound. Let's go back again to the definition. The bound couple will be synchronized. It means it doesn't change only for once. The bound is always active. This button changes the value of text1. And when I click it, text2 changes also, because whenever the data source changes, the widgets that are bound to it will change accordingly. Let's do something more with this data binding. I will add another button and call it +1. And for this text, not only does the value can be bound, you can see this link button everywhere. So let's try to bind its font size. First, I will need another widget in this set. So for this, I will create a variable and give it a value of 16. Go back to text2 and bind its font size. Go back to text2 and bind its font size to select and choose this number, its value. The next step is to add an event to this +1 button. When it is clicked, select this number and let it add 1 to itself. The current value of this number 1 is 16, and the text2's font size is currently, well, it is originally 26. Because the bound doesn't take effect in the editor. But let us go to preview. The font size is now changed to 16, and when I click +1, +1, and it goes larger and larger. Every time I click +1, the value of this variable adds 1 to itself. And since the value of it is bound to text2's font size, the font size increases at the same time. As you can see, we offered you a lot of options for you to bind. But before you do that, you have to think about if the two things that you are going to bind together actually goes with each other. For example, it doesn't make sense to bind this number to a wrapping style, because this variable has number values, but the wrapping style doesn't seem to be represented by numbers. Maybe I will need a string for this wrapping style. But there's still another question. Should I use by word and by letter for the value of this string? To figure out what values do these properties accept, we will need console log. Next, I will show you how to do this. First, I will need another button for this. Move it down a bit. And for this button, I will give it an event. When I click it, I will need System, or I can choose it here in the drop-down list. And the action is console log. I can write a title for my console log. For example, text2's wrap style. And for the detail, I will choose text2 and select its wrapping style. If I want to compare text2 and text1, I can add another action and select again the console log. And this one is for text1. Where is its wrapping style? Now let's go to text2 and change its wrapping style to by letter, and for text1, let it stay by word. To find your console log, right-click, Inspect, and your console log is right here. Press button, and it shows you that the text2's wrapping style is called break-word, and for text1 it is normal. So you can see it's actually not by word or by letter. Now when you want to bind the wrapping style of a text, you will know what to use. I can give this variable a value called break-word and go to text2 and bind the wrapping style with this variable. We can use text styles as another example. We have bold, italic, underline, and cross-out, and we can apply them all. Now let's find out the hidden value that represents these text styles. Going back to this button 2, and now we need to see what is the text styles. Go and find text style, and this one is for text 1. You can see the text styles is actually represented by numbers, and maybe it starts from 0 and adds up to 15. Since it is represented in numbers, maybe we can use this +1 sign to control the styles. Give this number a value that starts from 0 and call it style. Go to text 2 and unbind this font size, give it back to 26, and bind its text style to the value of this variable. Now when I click +1, text 2 is underlined, and when I continue to +1, the text style keeps changing. As we can see, the benefit of data binding is that users can simply change the value of variables or data to control user interface. Maybe you have already noticed, after the binding process, some arrows appeared in the object tree. So what are these arrows in yellow and blue meant for? We can hover over them to see. So this one is bound with another object, and this one is bound with 3 other objects. When we click on this arrow, it will highlight and show us to which widget it is bound to. And this one is bound with wrap style, style, and text context. You can then follow the highlight to see the binding details. Except from this data binding arrow, there are 2 other symbols to show that one widget is used by another, or others. The first one is this event bubble. It indicates that there is an event added to this widget. And the second one is this little circle. You can click it to find out the action that refers to this widget. If I add a new widget, you can see it has none of the 3. Therefore, when you want to delete a widget, please be very careful if the widget have either one of the 3. When it does, if you delete it, it may cause unexpected problems to your program. Another thing that's worth mentioning is that we usually don't bind a values property to another values property, just like what we are doing here. I can even bind this to maybe this button's width, and it shows 150 pixels. I am able to do this, but this is not recommended. What is better is to create a variable and bind the property of a widget to the variable. This is because it is easier to control the value of variables. Next, let's practice data binding by making a simple contact list. First, let's create a rough user interface for this contact list. For a contact list, it will basically have a column of names and the phone numbers, and I'll also add an edit button and a delete button. I will first complete a name card for one contact, and then we can copy-paste it. Add to this page a row and use it as a name card. So name it the name card. And in this row, I will need first the contact's name and then its phone number. Because we don't need calculations for phone numbers, we can store them in text instead of in numbers. Next, I will need two buttons for edit and delete. Make them smaller to fit into this line. I think 60 pixels is enough. And for this row, I will set it to wrap. Going on to modify these widgets, give it a smaller font size and a larger width. Align them to the center. And this one is the name, and this one is the phone number. The two buttons are edit and delete. Next, change the font size smaller and modify the radius of its border. Make them thinner to 30 pixels, and for the delete button, I will give it red. Now they are sticking together, so I will give them both a margin left of 10 pixels, and it looks better. Maybe this should be 64. And now I can clear the background color of this row and copy paste this row in the page. But we want some space between them, so before I copy paste it, I can give it a margin top of 10 pixels. The next step is to add data. For repeated data that have the same structures, we usually use arrays, but which kind of array are we going to use? From previous lessons, we can know that the most commonly used one is this matrix object array. Rename it to contact list. Comparing to matrix, matrix object is more straightforward. When using data binding, we can locate one certain element in that array. For the contact list, we will have a column of names and a column of phone numbers. Remember to use string for phone numbers because we are not calculating them. And we will need some friends and their numbers. For now, I will have 4 of them. So the numbers change it a little bit. And friend's name. If now I go straight to preview, it will look like this and on a phone. So how do I display the name and numbers? I will have to bind this array to these name cards. For each row, I will link it to a row in the contact list. Make a screenshot of this object array for reference. For the first name, I will link it to the object array's element. It means a certain element. Defines row and column. So the row is 0 and column name. I can copy paste it for the other names. Change the row. Also, the row number is 2. When you are copy pasting it, don't forget to activate the data binding. And for numbers, And now we are done, and every phone and name widget in this object tree is pointed to with a blue arrow. Now when we go to preview, and we seem to have some problem with these phone numbers, so maybe we should make some adjustment to the width. Okay, so now we've finished matching the data and the user face. Now let's add some effect to this edit button, and we should start with some simple ones. For example, directly change their name by clicking this button. We've already known that we shouldn't add an event to directly change the value of this text. What we should do is to set the event target to this object array. And when the value of this array is changed, it will communicate the change to the property that is bound to it. So let's go to the edit button. It is here, and add an event to it. When it is clicked, select target, the contact list, and set value, or set one element. Set value is for the whole array. And now this is what we need. We're changing this name of Luke, so the row index is 0. Notice it starts from 0 instead of 1, and column name is name. We're going to change it to a new name, say
Carl.
Let's go and try it. Click Edit, and the name is changed. And that is pretty much for this video, but I'm sure you have noticed we have actually gone through a pretty tedious process. Now we have 4 contacts, and we have to repeat binding them for 4 times. And when we want to change a certain value, we have to locate to the row and column. But rest assured, from next video on, you will no longer be doing this manually. We will introduce to you this v-for widget, and this v-for widget together with data binding will lead you to a brand new world. Using data binding and v-for widget are 2 indispensable skills in HYCODE developing, so feel free to repeat these videos and do more practice. To end with, let me do a recap on today's video. To bind a certain property of a widget, click the Bind button on the right. After this cursor icon appears, click it and select from Tree. It may require an extra step from your keyboard input. This is the row's number and this is the column's name. And you can click the corner to expand the editor. This will be easier for you to type in your own formula. After 2 elements are bound, they will be synchronized. When the data source changes, the other element will change in real time. And that is all for this video. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.